When was the last encounter you had with an organization that just fundamentally didn't live up to what you thought they were going to be like? We're going to start with that question, and I'm going to give you a quick overview of kind of how this next session is going to work. And because it's going to be a little bit different. You all have a worksheet, so we're going to actually do some actual journey mapping, and I'll explain this whole process to you all along the way. So I'll hold your hand through this whole thing. But it's going to be a lot of table activity. So if you are at a table by yourself and you want to sit with a new friend, now's a great time to move. You're welcome to do that. And so back to that question, when was that last time that you had an encounter with an organization that just didn't live up to your understanding of who they were? We're going to take a couple minutes, and I want you to share around your table kind of that experience, your experience in that moment. So a couple minutes, I'll bring us back here, and we'll keep going. Well, I'm going to call your attention back up here just for a few more minutes. We're going to go back and forth out of this. I'm going to kind of give you some guidance on what the day will, or this next session will be like, and then you'll jump back into the tables and work on some things. But before we get going, I wanted to give you access to the slides real quick, just in case you might want them for reference as we work through this journey map. So you're welcome to grab them there and use them as reference as we carry on. But I want to give you just two examples or two stories from my own personal experience about how an organization just missed it. And I'm going to focus on just kind of highlight that I feel like these two examples really demonstrate how easy it is for organizations to just fall into this gap between what they want to deliver and what their user actually is experiencing. So this takes me back several years. I was leading the digital team that was responsible for Governor Mike Huckabee's presidential campaign. So back 2008-ish, I guess it was. And our job in that work was 99% digital. And we had this one-off print job. Like we had a print run that needed to be of a certain quality. It needed to have a certain volume for the run and to support the campaign. And I had a lot of print experience prior to that. And most of my colleagues, though, had never really worked on a print job. So I called around and find out who could actually fulfill this kind of volume and quality for this project, and got some good recommendations. And I took a colleague with me that had never been to a print shop before. And I knew what a good print shop was. My very first job was at Our Daily Bread Ministries, and they have a phenomenal print operation there. And so I knew what quality and excellence looked like, but this guy had no idea. So this is his brand new first experience to anything like this. And so we made our way to the print shop, and I could tell when I got there that I was about to experience something maybe a little different. And even though this print shop had come with a really good recommendation, we arrived, and walking through what appeared to be the front door, it was kind of one of those situations where you're in kind of a more industrial looking building and you're not sure, is this the front door? Am I supposed to go in this one or not? So we go through, and there's this kind of a lobby area. It's more like a breezeway of sorts. And in walking through, it was like stepping back into maybe the late 70s. Like you remember like the dark paneling and the shaggy carpet and like the wall sconces and the low ceilings, and everything just felt really claustrophobic. And so we walked down this really narrow hallway and to where there I guess it was like a conference room of sorts. And it had a big, giant, heavy table in the middle, dark, closed, and the blinds were casting this yellow light across the whole room. And that's where we met with our representative that was going to demonstrate the quality of their work and the whole deal. And I left that whole entire experience thinking, this doesn't feel to me like a top-notch quality operation. And the truth of the matter is, when they first started that print shop, that experience that they created with the paneling and the carpet and the dark conference room, that was a moment in time that probably demonstrated quality and care and sophistication and the whole deal. But fast forward 20, 30 years, and it just felt out of place. It didn't resonate at all with the kinds of quality that they were putting out in the market. So that was kind of story number one. And that one just really kind of, for me, just embodies this idea that what used to be quality yesterday doesn't necessarily translate to quality today. Even though like nothing about the facility really changed, it was the customer's expectations changed. The context around us changed. And that's what translated into a really mismatch between my expectations and what they were delivering. The second one is actually a little more recent, and this one probably hits home to a few of you. In the middle of Grand Rapids, there's countless nameless, faceless, tall office buildings. So Grand Rapids, Michigan is where I'm from, and I was in one of these buildings this last year, and you need a key card to get in the elevator, key card to get you to your floor, and then you get out on the floor, and this organization had the whole floor to themselves. But you needed a key to get into like the official office space, but then you needed a key to get past the lobby, and they had one of those kiosks that had the facial recognition thing. So all of this like security checkpoints. And then of course, if you need to use the restroom, you need another key combo to go use that. And it was just like passcode after key after security measure, one after the next. And that from my personal experience, this was miserable. Every time I turn around, like, do I have the right way to get to the next room? And the truth of the matter is that in this situation, like every new lock was instituted because the context or the use of the building changed. So nobody sat down and said, we need 50 locks everywhere. It was like, well, this office space is going to be used a little bit different. It's going to have different needs, or people are going to access it differently. So let's put a pass thing here. And we don't need anybody at the front desk anymore because of COVID, because clients aren't coming in the building anymore. So we can probably basically lock down the lobby area, and we'll put in one of these security kiosks that does the facial recognition, and so on and so forth. And so nothing about that initial experience, like probably 20 years ago, conveyed this notion of like security measures everywhere, and you can't go anywhere or do anything. But the natural evolution of changing use cases of the space ended up creating a really terrible guest experience. And it wasn't by design. Nobody set out to create that terrible experience. It just happened. It evolved over time. We bolted on new technology here and there, especially because of COVID. And next thing you know, we've got this cumbersome user experience. So those two stories, I think, speak to a lot of our digital experiences. And I'm sure that probably some of those experiences that you shared around the table a few minutes ago probably related a little bit to that, kind of this mismatch. So how do we solve that? How do we take a time out from understanding the experience that we are delivering to our guests, our donors, those that we're ministering to? How do we kind of zoom back out and understand what they're experiencing? And that's what a journey map is really helpful to do. It gives you a tangible way. We're going to create an artifact together that outlines that experience. And a journey map is two-dimensional, though. On one hand, it's going to just simply document all of the experiences or the touch points that your donor, in our case, we're actually be focusing in on a donor experience. But you're documenting all those steps and phases and touch points that actually exist today. And then the other dimension is we're going to try to understand how your actual donor is feeling in that moment. Is it a positive experience or a negative experience? So really the journey map is anchored in the understanding of someone else's experience. And that's what's really going to give it the power down the road. So here's my hopes for today is that I want to give you a tool, like an actual tool that you can use to deepen your empathy with your donor. And I'm using donor as like a placeholder. Chad and I were talking about what would be a good context to walk a diverse group like this through, and donor felt like a good place to start. But maybe you're in a situation where you don't have a particular donor. Maybe you have a client, or maybe your context is a little bit different. So feel free to just interchange that word donor for the particular user or person you're trying to service. So deepen your empathy. We're going to actually use a tool to help us do that. And then it's also, this tool is going to help us bring clarity regarding that donor experience. So it's going to help us see all the bits and pieces and how they connect together so that you can actually get eyes on what this thing is. Because just like that experience in that nameless, faceless office building, the experience evolves over time and things get bolted on, and it's not that often we actually take a time out and actually look at what actually happened over the last year, 2 years, 3 years. Next is we're going to collaborate on your tables. So there's going to be, as we go through this entire process, lean on your peers that are at your table and ask them questions and get inspiration from them. And then, of course, this is a capability or a tool that you can use in any context that you need to understand your user or your customer experience a little bit better. So hopefully if this is a familiar tool, we're sharpening it a little bit maybe. If this is a brand new tool, this is something that you can hopefully use and get some reps with down the road. And of course, have a little fun. Like just prior to coming up here, I asked ChatGPT, and I should just read it. I asked ChatGPT, there's I won't cheat, I'll just read it. 150 people have been sitting several hours in a conference room. What are the top 3 things that are likely going to be distracting during an hour-and-a-half workshop? Top one, of course, was physical discomfort. So you all just had a 10-minute, 15-minute break. So hopefully you got a chance to stretch, maybe get some water, something to drink. Number 2, mental fatigue. You're probably feeling it this late in the day. So part of the reason I think this workshop is this part of the day, we are gonna change the modality a bit. You've got a piece of paper you're gonna write on, hopefully draw some pictures, have a little bit of fun along the way. And then of course, digital distractions, which is why we're not doing this on a collaborative whiteboard on your computer. You got a physical piece of paper that takes up half the table, so hopefully you'll have a few less distractions. So. All right, so that's the outcomes that we're after today. And over on the right here, you'll see these are activities that we're going to do. This language might be familiar to some, but if it's completely foreign, that's fine. We're going to walk through it together and hopefully learn a little bit along the way. And you'll see the 2 primary activities there are around an empathy map and a journey map. Now, the session is really around journey mapping, and that's the bulk of the work today. But in my opinion, you can't really do a good journey map unless you have some deep in your empathy about who you're actually following along the journey. Because it's more than just simply documenting the actual touch points along the way. You're trying to dig deep and understand what you think that individual is feeling in that moment. So that's why we start with building a little empathy. We're going to translate that into a journey and hopefully have some good insights along the way. All right, so let me just keep cruising here. Empathy is a lens that brings our donor journey into focus. And that's why we're going to start with empathy. And actually, I'm going to take a quick time out. One of my favorite definitions of empathy, maybe it's not a definition, or maybe it's more of a way of understanding it, is think about empathy as not what you might feel in someone else's shoes. Although that might be common thing to do, but instead think about how they feel in their shoes. It's imagining getting out of yourself and into someone else's space. That's the real value of starting this way, and it's really hard work to do because we bring so much experience and passion for our work into delivering the thing that we've been called to deliver. So stepping out of our own space and translating that into someone else's language and worldview is hard work, but critical work. In fact, Back to the Bible mentioned it earlier today that 100% of the time we think we know what our customers really want or donors really are, and about 100% of the time we're wrong. So that's just evident of the fact that empathy is needed and it's helpful. So, okay. Now I'm gonna do a quick flyover on this top portion of your worksheet. This is the empathy map piece. So I'm gonna call out the components of it, what it is, how to think about it, and then you're actually gonna sit around at your table together and work on this. So it was mentioned earlier that there is this kind of idea in the software world around a persona. And you can think of a persona as like a general representation of a bunch of different people that kind of embody a general perspective about things. And these are the elements that are often used to help build out a persona. So you'll notice on this top patch, you can ignore the little icons, but the top piece, you'll see a spot for a name, some details, and I'll go into these a little bit here in just a second. The objectives, frustrations, what do they see and hear? What do they think and do? So that's an overview of what the components are. Now let's talk quickly about how to actually think about this. All right, your worksheet is it's primarily around your donor experience. So just keep that in mind. We're gonna walk through the donor experience, and we are gonna journey with, in this case, it's Titus. I just picked a fictitious human being, but in my mind, this is gonna represent, I'm gonna start building a character around Titus. And you'll notice that I labeled my journey map up here at the top. I called it the podcast donor journey. So I'm not representing a ministry, so I'm just making this up as I go. But you, in your context, just fill in the blanks accordingly. And then Titus he's kind of I'm picturing him in my mind as the podcast user, the primary podcast user. And I know a little bit about him. Let's say he's generally 32 years old. He's married. He's newlywed. He works in fintech, and he lives in South Florida. So that's some general information, just to help me again build a little bit of empathy for this donor that we're going to be journeying with. All right, so those are the basics. That's the really easy stuff. The next two pieces, objectives and frustrations, are really the heart or the goal behind building out an empathy map. And really what you're trying to do is get an understanding or a deeper view into what are they after? So their objectives, what do they want? What makes them frustrated? So I pulled in a couple examples here. So for Titus in this situation, again, he's our podcast donor journey. Titus, he's 32, works in fintech. He's got a general objective for listening to this podcast to grow in Christ likeness, to be a good husband, a potential father, and he probably wants to get unstuck in his spiritual growth. Those are his objectives. That's what he's bringing to listening to the podcast. So think through what does your donor, what are their objectives? His frustrations. It's hard to find time to fit this into his life. His work culture is hostile to his faith. So that's frustrating for him. He's not sure who to trust. There's a lot of different voices, especially in the podcast space. He's not sure who to trust. And he feels like he's alone. Like he doesn't, like his work culture has him isolated in his faith, and he doesn't know, am I on this road by myself in fintech? So what does he see in here? Here's some examples here. He's got conflicting views. He sees division everywhere. He's also seeing versions of faith that he admires. So it's not like he's all seeing doom and gloom, but he's getting a little glimpse of things that he actually likes to see. And then that was see in here. Think and do goes here's some examples and placeholders I put in here. He goes to church with his wife. That's something he does. He's got a 45-minute commute. That's something he does. And he thinks of, he thinks with right resources. Yeah, he thinks with the right resources he'll grow. Like he has this expectation that if I have the right tooling, I can actually grow. So, all right. that's a model. I intuited that from, my own little bubble. You actually have real context to pull from in your own ministries. So what I want you to do around your table is start to fill out this top portion. Try to think of in like a little bit broader than an individual. Like if you think of like, oh, I know a specific donor and here's the things they care about, that's better than nothing. But if you know what they're generally like, start to fill that out in there. So I'm gonna give you a few minutes. We're probably gonna spend about 10 minutes trying to do this, not a whole lot of time. And as you fill it out, as the table kind of like settles in on, hey, we've got this kind of fleshed out, hopefully you've got a few brave people at your table that are willing to share who your stand-in journey partner is. And I'm gonna be floating around fielding questions. So if you have a question, just raise your hand, I'll pop over and we'll see if we can sort it out. All right. We got one right now, yeah.
How do you get this level of empathetic information or these attributes in a general picture of donors that you don't have research that tells you what those are?
I love that question, and I'm so glad you asked it. For those who couldn't hear, how do you get that kind of clarity or accuracy on a donor that maybe you haven't researched? This is the first kind of like pinch point of this workshop, is that this is assuming that you know who your donor is, you kind of know their sensibilities and whatnot. But as we heard earlier, our assumptions about who that person is almost always wrong. So the best thing you can do right now is use your intuition and what you expect and keep that loosely as a hypothesis about who this person is, so that next week or the week after you can actually go talk to some folks and flesh it out. All right, hopefully everybody has a good fictional character that you can carry with you through the rest of this worksheet. Hey, if you ended up with someone who's like, concrete, that's fine. That's fine. It's better than nothing. Yeah, we're building empathy, right? If you've got someone firmly fixed in your mind, that's the goal. So. All right. So, can I pick on? Can I ask? Would someone be willing to introduce your persona to the rest of the group here? So, kind of get a flavor of what some of these might be like. Yes, right here. Go for it. Yeah, that's Eddie. And as you were, I'm not sure everybody could hear who Eddie is, but as you were describing Eddie, immediately a guy in our Tuesday night small group at church came to mind. Like, I know that guy. And that's the point of having this artifact, is that it's a shortcut for understanding who that person is, understanding that experience. So now when you refer to Eddie, now we all know who Eddie is. We know he's 50, he's got some hard conversations to have with his kids. He's interested in growing the kingdom, and business is hard. Like, Eddie now becomes the shortcut for all of that. We get to internalize that. Anybody else have a persona that they want to share? One more, come on. I'm looking back here at the marketing tables. There we go.
All right, my persona is Larry. He's 53 years old.
Awesome. And did you say When Helping Hurts? A book? Our pastor at church just referenced that this last fall. And yeah, that's fantastic. Yeah. All right, so that's a great example of substituting subscriber in this case instead of donor. So there's a great example of how you might want to use this tool down the road if you want to think through and develop some empathy for someone beyond just a donor, maybe someone who's actually receiving on the receiving side of the ministry or on the contributing side. So interchange that as needed. This is a great reminder for me that every interaction shapes the donor journey. Like, every little thing along the path shapes how that donor experiences your organization. And we've got kind of a boilerplate or a template that you can use that it's really general. And you'll see at the bottom half of your of your worksheet here, and it's the one that has little icons going from awareness and consideration to donate to reoccur and support, and the one that nobody ever wants to think about, discontinue. So we're going to use that as a guide for the next few minutes, and we're going to follow your persona through each phase of the journey. Now, you'll notice on your worksheet that the journey is really donor specific. It's got a couple like very donor specific things in there, like the donate piece. Maybe your context is, if it's a subscriber, maybe that's the moment they subscribe. Like maybe if you need to adjust this worksheet to your context, feel free to pluck out one of those top level icons and just scratch out the specific action that is relevant to your persona. So that's the general guidance for this bottom half of the worksheet. But I'm going to walk you through Titus's version. So again, the journey map is focused on a podcast donor journey. So I'll walk through the touch points or the things that Titus encounters all along the way in context of those columns. And it'll give you a sense of what those columns mean, but we're going to come back and work through each column one at a time. And I'll provide a little more context there to help make this a little bit smoother for you. But you're going to pick it up pretty quick. All right, so awareness. How does Titus become aware of this podcast? Well, his wife sent him a link, and he saw a Facebook ad. So you'll notice that was a positive experience. You'll see a dotted line that cuts through your worksheet. Everything above that dotted line is a positive experience. Everything below that dotted line is a negative experience. And the experience is judged by Titus. Is Titus having any negative experience here? Does the organization or the experience or that touch point, is it aligned to what he expects or what he hopes? So you'll notice that subscribing to the podcast I put as low. He hit the podcast page on this ministry's website, and he couldn't easily find the way to subscribe. He doesn't use Apple Podcasts, and he doesn't use Amazon or Spotify. He uses a different one, and he didn't know how to do it. So it was not a good experience for him. So it's below. You notice that from there, he listens to a podcast. And in the end of the podcast, there's a call to action. And that call to action is to go to a website and sign up for an email. Well, the email wasn't mobile friendly. So it was a negative experience for him. And of course, way down at the bottom is CAPTCHA. Everyone who's ever had to fill that out knows it's a negative experience every single time. So, and from there, now he's got to confirm. It's still a negative experience. Like I'm jumping through all these hoops for what? Like I'm just trying to sign up. Still a negative experience. And then finally he gets a welcome email that's friendly and kind and gets a better sense of what's going on. And from there, maybe he clicks over to, you'll notice this is all within consideration. In the email, there's probably a call to, consider donating, consider contributing to the work of this ministry. He clicks over to there, and there's a nice landing page that's friendly, gives him a sense of the impact that his donation can make. And then, of course, he's got to fill out the form. Did I mention it's not mobile friendly either? So now it's a crummy experience. It's below the line. He gets an email that's really transactional after he does his donation. And then somewhere along the line, he gets an invitation to come back and make another contribution or re-engage the ministry in a different way. That's friendly and nice. But of course, that leads to another form and another email. And it's all pretty just transactional. And then you notice in the support, way down at the bottom, the chat bot, that wasn't a good experience at all. Didn't satisfy his needs, which led to a contact page that only had part of the information that he needed. So, but he was able to call humans. So you'll notice that the actual touch point here is he's calling a customer service rep. And that's a really positive experience. That triggers off an email, basically like that support ticket email. We heard you, here's how we're helping you resolve your issue. And then of course, the most discontinue experiences, in my personal experience, are usually pretty negative. Like I'm either done or frustrated or things weren't really satisfying. So he hits the form, again, not mobile friendly, and gets this really transactional email at the end that's just basically, your account was closed or whatever. So that's an example of all those little touch points that inform the donor journey. Your donor journey might look something like this or might look completely different than this. So we're going to work through each column one at a time, and I think it'll become become pretty clear what needs to happen. So we're going to focus this first couple of minutes on the awareness aspect. And here on the screen are just some of the types of things that might show up in the awareness piece. So this is someone who is not aware of your ministry at all and is just becoming aware. And as you dive into this, I'm going to challenge you, please think through your persona's perspective, especially when it comes to awareness. Quite often awareness doesn't come in as a friendly awareness. It's sometimes intrusive, or sometimes I'm becoming aware of it because I'm in crisis. So think through your persona's perspective on the thing that they've encountered. Where are they at? Is this a good thing or a bad thing? Or is it a positive thing or a negative thing? So the objective here, as we work out through the rest of this journey map, is to audit what is today. Like, what exists today? What are the things that you can observe? So if you have questions about that, pull up your phone, see what it is. Because the experience probably exists digitally. Check it out there. But you'll notice on your worksheet, there's lots of room to write. So as you are chatting at your table and you hear of someone else's really positive touch point, make a note of it. What's working it? Why does that work for that in that context for that persona? And maybe that's something that you can take back and implement down the road. So there's that. You've got 4 or 5 minutes to work on awareness. Again, share your what is today with the rest of your table once you get it jotted down. And then hopefully we have a few people volunteer at the end of this to kind of share their entire journey. And one quick note on that. I've got a couple things to give away at the end for those that are really good players. I only got 2, but really good players. So, all right, let's look at consideration. So, after someone becomes aware of the ministry or aware of the opportunity that's in front of them, that individual is going to go through a process of reasoning. Is this the thing for me? Is this something I'm willing to get involved with? It's a very distinct way of like thinking and reasoning in this whole experience. They're really making the decision. They haven't made the decision yet. They know what the options are, but what is actually going to be the thing that helps them make that decision? Make click in their mind that this is the thing that I'm ready to engage with. So here are some things that are likely part of your donor journey already, that are intended to help convince them that this is a worthy cause to partner with. So those are some ideas. Again, we're going to do the same thing. Work it out, get the actual touch points written down on the paper, whether or not this is a positive experience for your persona or whether it's a more negative experience, and then share some of that with your table. All right. Now we've worked through awareness. Now we've checked the box in consideration. Does anybody have a consideration, like a touch point in your journey map under consideration that was just really negative that they would be willing to share? If not, that's fine. Does anybody have a touch point within the consideration piece that showed up as negative? Yeah? Are you willing to share?
Sure. My lady got an email ad.
Oh, she got an email ad.
Like
Yeah, like a piece of spam.
to us.
Yeah. You gotta love it. Yeah, and that's probably a real thing. No. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. All right. Yeah. Now we know. Now we know. Okay. All right. So as you're mapping these touch points out above the line and below the line, you can start to see that there's probably some variance in how positive or negative the experiences are from your persona's perspective. And I know that some of you are already starting to think through, all right, well, if it's negative now, how can I bring it up to a positive experience? So keep that in mind as we move through the rest of this, because you're going to identify some of those things like, oh, I know exactly what I can do to make this thing better for my donor. So just keep that in mind. All right, so next up is the fun one, actually, right? We're going to actually donate. And it's fun, of course, if your persona is actually going to have a good experience donating. For many donors, like this is a positive experience, like internally, like this is something they desire to do or feel like this is an extension of growing in Christ-likeness to be more generous. But do the actual things that facilitate that generosity, how does that register with your persona? So again, same activity. Here's some examples that might currently exist, and think through from your persona's perspective. Is this a more positive experience or a more negative experience? All right, we have worked through awareness, consideration, and the actual donate piece. So we're about halfway through this particular part of the worksheet, and here's where I want to just entice you to fill this out. So I've got 2 books that are kind of like the go-to books for shaping digital experiences. First one is About Face. This is the 4th edition. It tells you how just resonant it has been with the digital community, and it talks about how to create digital products from start to finish. It was written by the premier digital, kind of like the godfather of sorts, from his name is Alan Cooper. For those in the tech space, that name will ring a bell. So this book and then Designing for the Digital Age, both kind of in the same wheelhouse, both from a studio out in San Francisco called Cooper Studio, and they have served me well for many, many years. So I've got one of each up here, and whoever is willing to share their entire journey at the end of this, I've got 2. So it's got to think of like, you got to be able to share the whole thing. So you're going to give us all an example of who your persona is, and then walk us through awareness, consideration, donate, and so on, and then you get a copy. So just keep that in mind. That's what we're cruising towards. Next up is reoccurring, which is, of course, a little bit different than recurring. So reoccurring, this is this idea that you're going to re-engage with a donor. And I think ideally that's probably going to evolve into a recurring gift, but reoccurring. So here's some of the types of things that are likely in place in your donor journey already. It's not an exhaustive list, of course, but if you have an actual piece or a touch point, go ahead and map it. And again, think through your persona's perspective. Is this a positive experience for them or a more negative experience for them? We've taken our journey persona from awareness to consideration, the actual donate process, and now, of course, the reoccurring. Next up is the support piece. These last 2 pieces of the journey are often the most neglected. Most people don't think through, there's a lot of focus on getting a donor into the system. There's not a whole lot of focus on how do we support them when they need to change their address, for example, or when they need to change their giving amount or that kind of thing. So I need to change my marital status or whatever the case might be. That's that stuff that falls into support. So here's a few things that are often show up in this support column. Again, try to think through what is your persona feeling at that moment. And for the most part, they're probably bringing a less than awesome kind of experience to the table already. They've got to make a change. And that change requires them making effort. So they're the ones making the effort to begin with. So keep that in mind as you place your support touch points. All right, we have moved from awareness to consideration to donate, the reoccurring, and of course, support. The last one is the one that most people don't think about because sometimes this kind of happens even without our understanding or awareness. Someone might discontinue, let's say if they're a monthly giver, they go onto a website, for example, so there's a touch point, and they just simply hit end or terminate my account or whatever. And sometimes that's literally the last kind of moment in that journey. For others, there's probably a softer landing, if you will. There's more hand-holding during that discontinuing process. Maybe they have to make a phone call, or this is going through a hardship, and they've got to readjust their finances and Like there could be a lot of different reasons why your persona is in this point in their journey. But here's a couple of things that might be part of that discontinuing phase. So discuss among yourself, and then we're going to come back and talk about what to do with this thing, this journey map. We've just walked through our donor journey. These 6 phases are really generic, and you could easily substitute a donor for a subscriber. If you have an e-commerce part of your ministry, you could easily substitute in there purchase. So think through, like this is a really generic tool that hopefully you can use in various contexts that as you're trying to deepen your empathy for those that you're serving, and think through specifically how they experience those touch points. Because quite often, how we intend them to be experienced is very different than how they actually are experienced. And if we dial in a little bit of empathy for those users, we can hopefully ratchet up a better experience in the future. So that's really the point of doing this activity, is to see what's above the line and what's below the line. And so now the next challenge at hand for us to think through is, if your donor could change one thing about their donor experience, what would it be? So take just a couple minutes and look at all the things that are below the line, and just identify one that you think your donor would be most encouraged by if you did something about it. And just put a little star next to it. I'm going to flip back a few slides here just so we can see the example that I made for Titus. Hopefully, as you've done an assessment of what currently is your donor journey, there are some things that are below the line. And you'll notice that on this one, I put a little star on the actual donation form. And my reasoning for myself on how I got to that conclusion was that this is that moment where Titus is he's at his aspirational high. Like he's excited about this opportunity to partner with a ministry or partner with a cause that is important to him. I want to capitalize on that specific moment to make sure that it is not a cumbersome one, or make sure that it's not creating a lot of friction for him, because I don't want to dilute that experience that he's already bringing to the table. So I identified that as like maybe the first thing, that if I could fix anything, that's what I would fix in this particular donor journey. So with that in mind, do we have I need 2 brave souls that are willing to come up here, give me a description, give us all a description of who your persona is, so give us a sense of who they are, walk us through that journey, and extra points if you actually have a journey that has some pretty big opportunities for improvement. So, any takers? Here we go, we've got one here. Thank you, come on up here so we can all hopefully maybe get a sense of what that is, maybe hear you. Is this mic an option? Awesome. Thank you. You're amongst friends, yeah. Your name?
Kat.
Kat? Well, thank you, Kat. That's on, so take it away.
Okay, so our persona is Jessica, and she's a 40-year-old nurse, and she's been married for 14 years, has 3 kids, and lives in Middle Tennessee. And her objective was to get more faith-based content and to be a better godly wife and mother, because she's really busy. And her frustrations are her work schedule, because nurses have really overloading work schedules. Her kids' extracurriculars take up a lot of that, and she has a lack of alone time. And seeing here, she sees a lot of death as a nurse, and she sees a lot of different faiths as a nurse, because people are going through these life-changing experiences. Think and Do, she goes to church, and she is trying to find something to do in her off time or her downtime as a nurse. So for awareness, the way that our journey was a podcast listener, and she, kind of like yours, she donated because of the podcast. A nurse friend told her about the podcast, so word of mouth, and she searched it on Spotify. But the downside was there were too many ads and too many options while she was searching for that. But then going to consideration, she found a link to click in the show notes, which a lot of podcasts have that. She did that to learn more and found that there are multiple resources on her website on the website, the podcast website. But the downside was it required a lot of contact information, and she tried to click to download some of the links, but a few of them wouldn't load. So that was kind of a downside. But back to Positive on Donate, she found it was really good information from those resources, and she enjoyed the podcast, so she decided to donate on the website. But the downside was there was no Apple Pay because she's a millennial and it's easy. So she had to fill out a whole contact form with her credit card information. And then over to Reoccurring. She actually decided not to be a recurring donor because she didn't see how her original donation made a difference, because there was no benefit. She wasn't told of the benefits of doing it, or she wasn't acknowledged as to how her donation made an impact. So over to support, she decided she wants to unsubscribe from when she had to give out her email when she downloaded the original files. And the only option to unsubscribe was to have to email a company rep from the podcast, which again, millennials don't like to talk, so she didn't want to do that. And so then in Discontinue, she had to have a conversation with a rep about why she stopped, and then she was finally able, after a few emails, to unsubscribe completely. So.
Awesome. Thank you. Let's give her a hand. And as promised, you get a pick.
I'm a
This is your first.
designer.
Yeah. All right. Well,
I'm a designer.
there we
so-
go.
Thank
Perfect. All right. We've got about face. Is someone willing to come up and give us a kind of a repeat of what just happened here? Emily and I worked this out ahead of time. So I saw what a great
we
job
did
she was
not.
doing.
Okay, so I come from a church instead of a ministry, so we did it kind of a little bit differently. Our person is Charles, and he's 30 years old. He has 2 kids, Bob and Larry. He has a wife, and he works at a family ranch because we are from deep East Texas, and everybody there has a job that's very fitting. Okay, so his objectives are for him and his wife to love their church and serve there, for his kids to know Jesus, and for him to be a good leader as a father. So his frustrations are because he has 2 kids, he's really busy, so if he wanted to serve or go to church, he would need childcare for anything, and he really feels the need for a strong community. So he's seeing no religious mindset or background, so he's very free in this environment. He sees clear direction and the Holy Spirit moving, so he wants to join, and he thinks that the Big C church is good instead of it's all about my church, it's about the church in the kingdom. So he feels really free, and he's able to have a relationship with the Lord. So his awareness is his wife sent him a social media post about sermons on Instagram, but since Instagram is so kind, they don't allow links in the caption, and we don't have a link tree, so we need to get a link tree. That's what I've learned from this. And we have a link in the bio to our website, so he goes to the landing page, finds the sermons, and he also finds our Get Connected page, which is basically a page to plug him into our community. So he goes to what we call next steps. So he has step 1 where he learns about our church, but there's no email for step 1 on following up if you have any questions. So we need to fix that. So then he goes to step 2, but there is a follow-up email for step 2 because step 2 is finding out what your strong suits are and where you like to serve. So he starts serving, but there's no follow-up email after a month if he likes the team that he's serving on, so we have to fix that. But he continues serving because he does like it. And there's 2 things under support. I put 1 to encourage community in small groups or in his teams. And then the second one is to make sure childcare is provided if he's coming early or staying late to serve, that he's not having to worry about who's going to pick up his child. So ask about their availability. If their kid's schedule is really busy, then maybe schedule them only once a month, or if they have a little bit more flexibility, schedule them twice a month. But there is not a frequent follow-up. I think there's 1 follow-up, but not enough. So then to retain them, we have volunteer banquet once a year that's a really big celebration of look what you guys did. And then on my teams, we do a quarterly outing for our team just to, once again, encourage that community so they don't feel alone and they have a support system. But if he decided not to stay, then we would have an exit survey and said, if you could change anything, what would you change?
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you. Well, in those two examples, you saw a handful of different kind of touch points, right? Like you saw some in-person touch points, some calling on the phone touch points, or emailing. So they're the modality in which your donors or what's the right word? Subscriber. I'm thinking of a congregant. Like, what is that person? A congregant, yeah, parishioner, or whatever context your church uses for someone who attends. They're going to bring a different sets of expectations to each one of those modalities, and how well are you delivering on that? So, kind of like back to how we started this conversation. Like, quite often, just the nature of time changes your donors' expectations on what to expect from you. You maybe did nothing wrong, but their expectations have changed over time. So when was the last time you revisited your donor journey? And then, of course, as new context changes or new use cases changes, or your team gets a new piece of technology, they integrate that into the experience, over time, that can become kind of Frankenstein together and create a really disconnected experience. So hopefully this exercise is helpful for you. I've got a stack of these papers up here that I don't want to take home. So if you found this useful and want to grab them, you're welcome to take those. And down here at the end, I'm not here on behalf of a company or as a consultant, but if you are interested in like having a conversation about your donor journey, you are welcome to shoot me an email or shoot me a text or call me. I'm happy to do it. This has been a big part of my professional experience for 25 years. A couple years ago, I did take a pivot, so I don't do this full time anymore, but it's still deep experience and close to my heart. So hope that's helpful, and yeah, thank you.